Hey, Chicago, what do you say? It's the CHGO Cubs Podcast presented by DraftKings, America's top-rated sportsbook. Make sure you download that DraftKings app and then use the promo code CHGO when you sign up. We are back again. Luke Stuckmeyer, Cody Bellinger, and Corey Friedman, and maybe Ryan Herrera in just a bit. We did a podcast. If you haven't downloaded or heard it, or you weren't there live on YouTube at 1:20 to 2:20 this afternoon, and we decided we got to do another one because, we get home and then we find out, sure enough, Cody Bellinger is now a member of the Chicago Cubs. 1 year, $17.5 million deal, a show me deal for a former MVP who has struggled at the plate the last 2.5 years. But in 2019 was the National League MVP, hit 47 home runs and drove in 115 runs. So, guys, I look at this, and first of all, we hope that maybe a shortstop signs here while we're doing this podcast, but this certainly looks as low risk, high reward. I personally love the deal.
Yeah, no, this is great stuff. I understand some people that will look at it and just look at the offense, but just from a pure 1 year, what he brings defensively and what he could bring offensively, it's totally worth the $17 million, in my opinion. He was going to get in arbitration. He was going to make more if he had stayed with the Dodgers. So, this entire season for Bellinger is all about reestablishing the value. This is the I've seen tweets of people saying this is like what they did with other guys in the past. And I guess maybe you can say that with some that worked out that the Cubs flipped. I saw someone in our replies saying that they're going to flip him at the deadline. And
no, that's not what this is.
No, it's definitely not what this is. There is no way, especially. And the only way I would say that is if we get through the rest of the offseason and this is the only big move that the Cubs make. So that's it. That's the only way that could actually be a thing. So this is a great start to what the rest of the offseason could bring.
Well, and this is one of those moves that I think I know why people are reacting like that, right? Like we all get it. We would look at this completely differently if they had made a set of bigger moves prior to this, which I think is how you have to look at this because we're assuming that's going to follow, right? Like there's a reason that we all talked about this before it happened, once the offseason started. The Cubs should have the money to pay, like you said, Cody, less than, he might have gotten if they tendered him a contract in LA. They have the money to take that risk. They need a glove in center field. He can also fill in at first if you want him to. He's an excellent base runner that the Cubs were terrible at last year. Their defense in center field, also terrible. He's really good at both of those things. If that's the floor, it's a good move to go along with other moves elsewhere. And then you have the added value that maybe, even if just for spurts of time, right? He gives you big bursts of offense, which you need. And then at that point, obviously it's highway robbery if he looks anything like the hitter he can be.
Yeah, it's a 2-for-1 with the two positions. And, there are always going to be fans out there that say, this is a bad deal. This is Hayward. He can't hit. Okay, this is not Jason Hayward. First of all, it's not a 7, 8, 9-year deal. It's a 1-year deal worth just over $17 million. Okay. Best case scenario, he's great. And maybe he does leave you in free agency, but you get a guy, worst case scenario, who can win you a gold glove in center field next to your gold glove left fielder. And not only that, like Corey said, good base runner, has the flexibility to play another position, right? And what was your alternative? You were going to have Hermosillo in center field, Ortega in
better than
field.
watching Ortega. That's what Jack says, man.
Right? Come on, guys. Like this guy won an MVP. He hasn't been that far gone. And don't forget what I was saying back when we had Michael Cerami on. I was putting the math together and I thought, well, of course they're going to go after Bellinger. The new hitting coach, Dustin Kelly, is a guy who was in the Dodgers organization when this guy was swinging the bat and hitting 47 home runs. Like they think they can find something, and he believes they can find something that will net him a bigger contract next offseason, one that his mega agent Scott Boras certainly wants him to get. So they decided we're going 1-year deal. And the Cubs are like, perfect. In 1 year, we might know what Mash Mervis really is. In 1 year, we might know that PCA is ready to play center. We might know that Brennan Davis is ready in the outfield. Canario, we don't know, but that's why it's a 1-year deal. And it seems like almost too good to be true, this fit, really. Like,
yeah,
17 million by these standards, like, he's the perfect 1-year guy. And I don't know if he's great. Let's say he's great and he shows you at 27 that he is the MVP guy again and he can play center field for your future. Okay, well then you get in the bidding mix and you trade some of the prospects that you think might be spectacular outfield replacements if you want to. So there's tons of flexibility with
it allows you to perhaps, and again, with the scenario that Luke just put out there, it allows you to perhaps move major prospects for a major starting pitcher at some point, perhaps. So,
or just for the Angels right now, maybe.
Bellinger.
Sure.
Bellinger's also a guy who, it's hard to like estimate what that value is, right? Because we haven't seen it yet. But like, he is a guy who should at least be a little thankful that the shift is gone, right? It's very difficult to say like, oh, his average is going to go up by this or this, but it should help a little bit. And like the weirdest thing, like with the Hayward comparisons, like Hayward hasn't been a plus defender like that in years, first of all. And he rated poorly in center field relative to how he used to play in right field. And they're not paying Cody Bellinger whatever they were paying Jason Hayward for 8 years. Like,
and that's not the jump on Hayward. That's the deal
it's
he
just
got.
Not the same. Yeah,
it's just not apples to apples. It's not the same thing.
Anyone comparing the two, I just feel like you haven't been paying attention. That's no disrespect to you as a Cubs fan. I just feel like maybe think about it before you angrily like send tweets. Like that's just the way I look at it.
They're not going to sell us that Cody Bellinger is their big prize. That's not what's going to happen.
Definitely not.
And the fit beyond that is really good. Yeah.
And if that is the only move they make, which it won't be, then you can come back to us and say we were right. We were right. They only made the Bellinger move. I don't believe it's coming. A better comparison is the Josh Bell deal that went down hours before that, right? Like he was another guy that was linked as a possible answer at first base. The Cubs didn't get Abreu. Then Bell was another name that came along. He went to Cleveland 2 for 33, but an opt-out after 1. So it's comparable. Defensively, Cody Bellinger's a way better player. And he fills the spot in center field. And again, if you need to ease in Matt Mervis at first base with maybe somebody else, again, still you might have Patrick Wisdom or somebody else playing some first base. It just allows you some flexibility at the first base position. And I would not feel bad, especially if you add the shortstops they're talking about adding or potentially adding. I don't feel bad about having him over at first base. That's for sure. He's good enough to play first base.
Definitely.
So
I think again, we don't have that added context yet, but yesterday especially was kind of giving us a lot of insight there. This is a no-brainer of a move if you go and make even some of the other moves that we expect them to make. There's a range of outcomes here, but the worst outcome is that he's a good fielder and a good base runner. And as people in the chat have said, it's not to dump on someone like Rafael Ortega, but he is literally an upgrade over him in every category, right? So at minimum, that's what happens. Fine.
I'm not expecting him to be an MVP, Corey. I'm really not. Like, even if he finds his old swing and everything works out great, I'm not expecting him in 1 year to turn it around all of a sudden and be an MVP again. But what if he's half of that? If he's half of that, you've had a massive upgrade in center field. Absolutely. And we already know that the Cubs have pointed out many times, the shift is gone defensively up the middle. It's going to be critical to be really, really good defensively. Well, now they have a really good center fielder, and you're hoping they're going to have a great shortstop and second baseman to go with it. And then we'll see what happens after that. But they're aligning themselves. Remember that when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, and I'm not saying they're winning the World Series. My point is that in 2016, they were a very good defensive team. Very good. Like
One of the best
in
of all
Cubs
time.
history defensively, best. Mm-hmm. So that's the type of thing that can make a difference when you don't have all the pieces in place. Something that'll get you an extra 4 or 5 wins a year. Better base running. They could have been better at base running last year. They could have been better defensively last year. All of those things. It's like, yes, they're looking for more power. And while Bellinger hasn't hit necessarily at all the last few years, in fact, what did I write down? Since he won the MVP in 2019, when he hit 47 homers, his slash line is 203, 272, 376. Not good, but he did hit 19 homers last year. So you are, even if he's the struggling batter that we've seen the last couple of years, he still brings you some power from the left side. So that's something to not forget. Like
need.
19 homers is not nothing.
And I think, like, you look at like the fielding and the base running and some of that stuff that he ups the floor on. Like, if they are as serious as they, I guess, sound to be in terms of like turning this thing into being actually competitive quickly, like, you have to improve on those margins, right? Like, this team was terrible on the bases last year. They made so many outs on the bases. They had, not good defenders at several positions. Like, you want to win, you want to go deep in October, you want to make a run like the Phillies just did. Maybe this team isn't going to do it by just blasting home runs, but you have to clean up some of that other stuff because it rears its head eventually.
Okay, Cody, go ahead. He's been in the top box watching the end of the Illinois game, and Joey, our producer, is a Texas alum, and so he has turned off the podcast, and probably this may never shut off. We may just go live for hours. But Cody, who is an Illini fan, just
this. I'm just gonna say this is better than that one time when Illinois and Indiana football were playing, and I had to deal with Illinois losing to Indiana live on YouTube, recapping a Cubs loss against whoever the hell they played this year. So this is better than beating the number 2 team in the country. Horns down, Joey. Love you though. You're not.
That was uncalled for. Just win gracefully.
Well, I know he would have said something if Texas would have won.
Going to be just looking at a second here.
I got to put my 2 cents in. All right.
Every time Texas loses, somebody's got to get on poor Joey's case. Somebody's got to get in his face.
I'm not a Texas hater. I'm just, they went up against my team tonight. Number 17 versus number 2. All right. Like, that was a great game. Went to overtime. All right. Again, if Joey was unbearable about being a Texas fan, this would be so much worse. But he's not. He's fine. And he kind of likes Illinois too. It's just not his number 1 team. And I get that because he went to Texas. Makes sense.
Joey's clearly the one chiming in from CHGO Sports saying, see y'all in March.
See y'all in March. Yeah. No, it's okay. I look forward to if they play each other again because I thought Texas was going to win that one. That one came down. That was a sweat. If I could have bet on that on DraftKings, I would have been sweating so much more than I actually was.
So if we're anyway. While we're sitting here killing time for Jed to close the deal with either Correa, Bogarts, and or Swanson, would you guys like to talk potential for shortstops? Would you like to talk about the starting pitching moves that were made today? Or would you like to talk about Wilson Contreras reports from our guy, the Capman?
We can talk about Contreras, I guess. Briefly.
Cap threw out there, and again, remember that he does have a relationship with Wilson Contreras. He's close. Like Wilson Contreras has been.
He told us the story on the podcast.
Yeah, he's been very nice to his son Brett. They've been over to it, hung out and had lunch together and stuff. He's communicating directly with Wilson. This is not an outside. And he has been told that he was offered multi-year deals, 5 years or more, by the Cardinals and by the Astros. Now, we've heard both teams kind of like rumored about, right? Like Dusty Baker even said, we're interested in Wilson Contreras. We're just waiting to see what happens with other stuff. 5 or more years. And I know Cody does not believe the Cardinals are going to do this, but if they go 5 years on Wilson Contreras, I have 2 things to say. One, I know Corey will disown Wilson Contreras no matter how much he loved him. Number 2, am I wrong about that?
No, dead to me.
No. And number 2, you can't deny that it wouldn't be a major upgrade over that old bum, Yadier Molina. Correct, Cody? I've made you both happy.
Yeah, I mean – yeah. Okay. So Here's my 2 cents, and I feel like I've said this for the last, honestly, since the deadline. It's that, obviously at the beginning of the year, I was all about extending Contreras. We also didn't know like some of the things that's thought of him around the league like we do now, and like that's what kind of changed my perception at the deadline. I'm not saying it fully changed my perception. I'm just saying that, okay, maybe you don't do whatever it takes to bring a guy like that back, because if the Cubs aren't really showing that they're showing interest, and then other teams around the league aren't showing interest, like enough interest to even make a trade at the deadline, except for the Astros, of course. Like then what are we missing here other than the fact that some of those things might actually be true? So I think that if he would have signed with, whether it's the Cardinals, the Astros, anyone, if it would have been for like a 2 or 3 year deal, then I would have been upset, because I think that's something that the Cubs should have done. But if we're talking 5 years for a guy who, on the Astros, it's reported that the Astros want to use him more in left field or DH, and then it'd be an occasional catcher. So they don't even really want him to be their full-time catcher. All right. That doesn't surprise me. Now, the Cardinals, that's what surprises me, because they had defensive-oriented catcher for 2 decades. And I know they have another catcher right now. Like, everyone has a backup catcher, but like they need a guy who can play at least the same amount of innings, or at least a little bit more. And if they're signing Contreras to be their catcher, considering what we know around what the league has said about him at this point, it just doesn't make sense to me that the Cardinals want to do that unless they really think they can fix those flaws. And like, they're just not a team that does that, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at on it. If he signs with the Cardinals for 5 years, like I said this months ago, if he does sign with the Cardinals for more than 4 years, I will kind of laugh about it. Like, I think that's an awful move by the Cardinals. Now, I looked at Yadi's contracts over the course of his career. When he was 30, the Cardinals gave him a 5-year, $75 million extension. When he was 30, and it went from 2013 to 2018. And in the first year of that, he had one of the best seasons of his career. He had like a 7.8 F4, whatever. It was like the prime, like the back end of the prime of his career. Then he started to trend down a little bit. He still had some okay seasons in there for his standards, and then a few bad ones, because he was getting older, right? So like, clearly Contreras is a better hitter than him. But in the defense, he's got the arm. I know, obviously, that was what Yadi was known for. I'm curious to what the Cardinals are even offering him to be, like, what the contract is. If they were at that, of course, the market is a lot different now, right? But 5 years, $75 million for Molina back in 2013. What are they offering Contreras? Like that's where I'm at with it. Like, if it's actually a thing. But at the end of the day, like, unless they're not going to use him as a full-time catcher, like, I don't understand if the Cardinals actually do it. And if they do it for him to be a full-time catcher, knowing what we know, I think it's a massive mistake by them. And you can clip me, you can cold take me later. Like, I'm just going based off what we know, what has been reported. And I mean, again, the Astros don't even want to use him as a catcher. They want to use him for 2 other positions more often than not. So again, and this is come from someone who wanted to keep him. So,
all right. Well, we'll see what happens with that. There are a lot of people in the chat talking about how John Morosi's been a marquee, and that a lot of people, including Morosi, are saying Cubs are very close to a multi-year deal with Dansby Swanson. And if that's the case, is he the first big free agent shortstop, or is he just one of 2 big free agent shortstops that they sign? I was listening to Ryan Dempster, who does a lot of Marquee, is on Marquee probably right now, on The Score earlier today. And based off of some of the things that he was saying, I would say that it sounds like everything you've seen, that Jameson Taillon seems like their number 1 target for pitching. That's just the way it feels, listening to someone who would hang out and be friends with David Ross and other people that would be in the know on that and on the Cubs network. And number 2 would be, he was asked straight up, if you were $1 billion owner of a franchise right now, what one player would you be going after this offseason? And he paused for a second and he said, well, Aaron Judge is a great player, but I have concerns about his durability for the type of contract he's looking for years-wise. Then he said, I'd be looking for a shortstop. Then he was pushed to answer, which shortstop? And he said, number one, Bogarts, a guy that he played with briefly in Boston, and a close second, Dansby Swanson. And pushed more on that about Dansby Swanson because the narrative out there is, well, Dansby Swanson is great, but basically he's very good defensively, maybe not as good offensively as the other guys that are out there. He said Dansby Swanson still has room to grow, and he believes he's growing and getting better, but he believes that Dansby Swanson may not be great at multiple things on the baseball field, but that he's very, very good at all of them. Like, he's not bad at any of them. He's very, very good. And when you have a chance to add a player who wants to get better, who is showing that he's getting better, and is very, very good at everything you want a baseball player to be good at, you go after that guy. And so that's why I still agree that I love what we talked about in the podcast this afternoon. Would you go after Correa, or would you go for the 2-for-1, possibly with Bogarts and Swanson? And if Swanson is close to making this deal, I hope Bogarts is right behind him.
So yeah. I'm not sure if Morosi said they were close to something on Marquee, but I'm definitely not seeing.
I just saw somebody in the chat say that.
Yeah, I'm just going through all the reporters. I don't see that necessarily, but I know he said he's the name to watch for the Cubs. He also threw out Jamison Tyone as the pitcher to watch. I think he mentioned Kodai Singh as well. He's kind of throwing out a lot of names, but they're all names that we've heard.
Our friends at Bleacher Nation said Dansby Swanson is the name to watch for the Cubs right now.
Okay.
According to John Morosi, who's on Marquee. So, yeah.
So maybe not something close. That at least there's a difference there. But
it's a name
he's
watch.
Throwing out a lot. They're clearly
Swanson is the most likely. There you go.
They're clearly in on all these guys, right? They're in contact. We know they met with Correa, and now it's a question of like what is gamesmanship? Who's driving up the offers for who?
Yes.
And look, like even in if your plan is to get both of those guys or two of them, it doesn't have to be Xander and Dansby. It could be Correa and Dansby, right? Like for all we know. If your plan is to get two of them, it's very difficult to align those things all at once, right? You have to do one of them first. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing to think that they would be able to go and get two. And now that was floated out there, right? Like I think we all hope that happens, but you have to get one done first. And then, you sort of see from there. We've already all laid out, like you kind of feel like you might need more, more clear offense or projectable offense if Dansby was the only shortstop that you signed. But again, like that's one of those things where it's difficult to be sure of what that plan is if you're Jed and Carter Hawkins until somebody signs on the dotted line, right? And I think I would keep going back to the Trey Turner thing with the Phillies and the Padres is a really good example of that. Like you read that AJ Preller and the Padres felt really strongly about their offer, and they were really internally like upset and disappointed that didn't work out for them. So I guess it's all just a long-winded way of saying like they can have all these plans, they can be in these rumors, we can be hearing a ton of things. You got to get one to sign the deal first.
That's right.
And then you can still execute other things, but step by step, right?
Let's say it is Dansby Swanson, right? Like that gives you so much flex. If you can get him to sign tonight or tomorrow before he heads into the weekend and gets married. And again, his fiance plays for the Red Stars. So there's another reason to want to come to Chicago if all things are equal. If you get him to sign, you've now locked up shortstop and second base. Great defensively. Like you're probably the best team in baseball defensively at short and second. You're that good. And now you put Bellinger, a Gold Glove guy, in center field. You've done one thing you said you wanted to do. Be great defensively up the middle. You've done it already. Swanson also does give you some of the power that you've been looking for. Like he may not be as diversified as a hitter as the other guys are, but he does give you the power. He does give you some of that power potential. So, and because he most likely is the lowest salary of the three, if he is the first guy to sign, he still allows you to go get one of the other two. If you really want to open up the checkbook, as we've been told, Tom Ricketts has told Jed, go ahead and do it. So,
and I think like that
your
specifically
floor
too,
has been set, and it's really good.
And you're also signaling to people that you're serious and you're going to be, a big player. But like, I think in the 2-for scenario, like, I think what maybe you would be hoping for there, you get Dansby to sign, and then you hope that the Red Sox continue to mess around with Bogaerts and you can slip in, right? And say, look, your old team's jerking you around, right? They didn't extend you. They're jerking you around. They're not making you a good enough offer. Come to Chicago. Let's get this done. Like, move on from Boston. And you can kind of like swoop in after you've already gotten one. Maybe that's the idea. Yeah. The last thing, like, on this too, like, because I see in the comments, like, people are like, they had Jed on marquee. They had Carter on marquee. They had JP Morosi on marquee. Mm-hmm. As we said earlier today, you can never guarantee anything. This smoke is too hot, y'all. They're letting everybody on their own media channel telling you, we're going to spend money. We're close to deals. We're going to spend money. There's no way that they're dumb enough to do all that and then try to sell us on Cody Bellinger being the big guy. No chance.
Let me give you this offseason and see what you think. Like, it's not the highest ceiling. Like, the highest ceiling is Swanson and Correa, or Swanson and Bogaerts, or Correa, whoever you want.
Signing all three that are left, Luke. That's the highest ceiling.
Okay, that's the highest ceiling is signing all.
Bogaerts playing first with Mervis.
Let's throw this out as a reasonable, what seems now as like it could be a reasonable offseason. Cody Bellinger is the guy you sign in center as a stopgap there. You don't know what you have. Then you sign Dansby Swanson to play short. You move Nico over to second. You don't end up adding the second shortstop, but you do end up adding Mancini over at first for a couple of seasons, waiting for Matt Mervis. And then you add to your rotation Jamison Taillon. I'd call it a pretty good offseason, guys. Like, yeah. I'm not saying that it can't be better than that, and I think the Cubs should shoot for even better than that. But if they get a starter, a guy who has potential to be a 1 or a 2 in your rotation, and you haven't traded anybody yet, and you have your center fielder for at least a year, and you have your first baseman for at least a year, and you have your shortstop of the future who's defensively as good as anybody, you filled some gaps. Filled some gaps, and the prospects are still coming.
I'll just say, and this is kind of circling it back to like the beginning of the Swanson talk here, is if they sign Swanson but Bogaerts isn't coming, then you really got to do other things to really make that seem like that was a great or at least a thought out decision and everything. Because I think if you're signing Swanson first, then you're definitely signing Bogaerts second. Like me personally can accept them, signing Bogaerts, and then if you miss out on Swanson, I think that it's fine. But I personally would love to just get one. But given the smoke about how they could get two, I have now reached the point now that, like, I don't want to say I'm full on expecting it, but I am hopeful that if they sign Swanson first with Bogaerts still out on the market and them using John Lester to recruit him and David Ross and Napoli, and the report today saying that the Cubs remain the highest, or the biggest threat to get him. If you sign Swanson first and then still don't get Bogaerts, and depending on where Bogaerts would end up going, I think I'm setting myself up for a little bit of disappointment there. I'm not saying it's a failed offseason. I'm just saying that I might be a little disappointed in the fact that you signed Swanson when it seemed like Bogaerts was the one that you really could have gotten. Yeah, I'll take either one, but I'm also with a lot of people who said that they would rather have Bogaerts, Turner, or Correa all year too. I'm just not going to complain to the point that to think that it's a failed offseason. So if it is just Swanson, then yeah, you still got a lot of moves. You gotta get Taillon, not Italian. Taillon. You gotta fix this catching situation, whether you're trading for Sean Murphy or you're signing Christian Vasquez. You still got the second tier starting pitching market. outside of Taillon, whether it's Senga or Bassett, whatever. Like you have to continue to add these types of pieces. And then I can really give you a grade on how the offseason went then. But as right now, sitting here at 9:01, December 6th, with all these rumors here in the heart of the winter meetings, if we're signing Swanson first, I'm going to be a little disappointed if they don't get Bogaerts as well.
Well, Cody, think of this. If let's just, again, totally hypothetical that Swanson is the next guy that they sign, and he's the first next shortstop off the market. You've just also added another guy in your back pocket that can now go to Bogaerts and say, you know what? I'm here too. Let's do this together. Let's make a tandem out of this. Let's not make it one. You have another recruiter. You don't just have John Lester. Now you have another guy that he's going to respect across the diamond that you can say, just like Scotty did to get Michael to come back.
Why don't
hey, Bogaerts?
I would question a little bit of Xander's character if he needs more than John Lester to convince him. I'm not sure who else he needs to hear from. But I think like the hypothetical offseason you laid out, Luke, I think is pretty good, right? Yeah. I think I kind of get where Cody's coming from in that it would be easy to look at that and say, okay, like if you were going to spend all this money and you were going to make all these moves, like you maybe could have done this better or like gone in a little harder and the team would be better, but it would be a good off season. And I think we would be able to look at the team and say, look, they did what they said, right? They improved in these areas. They did the things that Jed said he wanted to do. And they, they're not giving us a total like half measure of like a team that they're going to try to sell us on being remotely competitive when we're all sitting there on opening day going, no, they're not, right? Yeah. Like, I think it would accomplish that, but I think it would be easy to look and say like, man, what would that have looked like if you swapped Correa for Swanson, right? Like, that's all.
Sure. I get that. I'm just like, there are a ton of holes to fill on this team currently. And I think when everybody heard the pocketbook is open or the checkbook is open, everybody instantly wanted to spend $1 billion like the Phillies. By the way, the Phillies, doing Taijuan Walker for 4 years, $71 million. Add that to the $1 billion I was talking about spending since they've done Harper. 5 $100 million or more deals. And now you add Schwarber and Walker. Like they're spending money like it doesn't even exist in Philadelphia. And so I think that's what Cubs fans would like to see. But I'm not sure the Cubs are currently in that spot with the prospects they have coming up. Like that still might be one away. And I still say you can be very, very competitive this season spending. Listen, Jesse Rogers was telling us it was going to be like last year. If they get Dansby Swanson, Taillon, Bellinger, Mancini, and somebody to play catcher, and they also add Smiley to come back and add depth, and you have Sampson to come back, it's a better offseason than last year, guys. Come on.
Question.
It's way better than Stroman and Suzuki. Plus, you expect that Seiya Suzuki is going to be better his second year in the major leagues.
And
you're expecting
so are your young guys.
Yeah. You're expecting Morel to be something. You're expecting Nico Horner to continue to be the stud that he has become, right? Like, yeah, like that's what you think about these moves they make and then consider the young guys that they have on the roster right now. Like there's a reason to at least believe that they can be in the race. Like, so yeah, no,
it sets you up in future years too. Yes. Like, you need, as we all keep saying, they have a lot of holes to fill. They need to put, some people when they're looking at like, oh, should they sign this guy or this guy? They're like, well, they're too far away. Should they bother? And it's like, no, like the best way to get closer to being good and having a lot of good players, you have to start adding good players, right? If you keep looking at things going, no, we're too far away, like you'll never get there. Right. Yeah. So I think it would be a good start.
I've been accused
You're
of
bowing to Ricketts. You're bowing to Ricketts, Luke. The audacity, Luke. The audacity.
Ryan needs to be let in. He can join us very briefly here. There he is.
Hello.
Hi, Ryan.
Right next to him.
How's the buzz now?
Me and Cody hanging out right here.
Are things hot in San Diego, Ryan?
I'll tell you that.
It's buzzing.
Things are heating up. Things are heating up in San Diego. It's actually funny. I know you guys are definitely talking about Cody Bellinger news. But like I told you guys, I said in the Slack, I missed it. I was at the White Sox manager, Pedro Grifol, his press conference, right into David Ross's press conference. So for about 40 minutes, my phone just sitting on the table, and we get to David. So I'm not checking my phone, I don't see it, and then we get to David Ross, and like the first 6 questions are about Cody Bellinger, and I'm like what's happening here? What am I missing here? And then eventually I get my phone back. And I see the news. So yes, things heated up after that, and got a little hectic in Cubs world, at least over here in San Diego.
Look at my Twitter. The funniest part is that Ross was on MLB Network when he found out that they had signed Bellinger. Obviously, he was part of the conversation and would have known that they were talking to him and probably had conversations with him as a free agent, but he didn't know it was a done deal. And then he found out on live TV and dropped a 4-letter word, which was really, really funny. But I mean, that's how quickly it's happening. He's going from being in the know to walking on a set, and all of a sudden 5 minutes into the show, he's no longer in the know of what's going on with his general manager and his team.
Well, that's what we talked about earlier, right? Like how quickly things can happen, and you don't really know until it happens. And so when David Ross is even kind of shocked at the news that he says, "Oh shit," or whatever it was. When he's shocked in that sense, then that tells you that how quickly these things can happen for people that aren't in those rooms and in the war room, in those conversations, doing that stuff. So yeah, I saw the video. It's funny. I laughed, but it was it just goes to show you that things can just happen in a quick second. So if Cody and Corey are planning on sleeping tonight, I don't know if I would.
But he does like the fit, right? Like he really likes the addition of Bellinger on a 1-year deal, a prove-it-year deal.
Yeah. David Ross, talked about how just Cody Bellinger. Obviously, they haven't confirmed anything, so they couldn't be like, "Oh yeah, Cody Bellinger is bringing this to our team." So more in general terms, that Cody Bellinger is obviously a good defender. Had some success in the past, had it in the past few years, but had the potential for to be one of those bounce back guys. Ross, he likes the I don't know if I'd say elite defense, but very, very good defense out in center field. And that if that's what he brings to the Cubs, obviously that makes up for a lot of the things that went wrong for the Cubs last year as far as center field defense goes. It was kind of just a reflection of everything we've talked about when we've talked about Cody Bellinger on the show, that the Cubs had a need for a left-handed bat. Cubs had a need for a defender that can play very good defense out in center field and also can move over to first base and do things there. And now that Cody Bellinger, once that officially becomes official, but that's their center fielder, and that's what we've talked about. That's why we said he fits so well. And I think it felt like David Ross felt the same.
Good deal. Hopefully tonight, the buzz now seems to be that maybe Dansby Swanson will be the next shortstop to go. He's being linked. Morosi saying he's the most likely to the Cubs. We're all still holding out hope that maybe it's multiple shortstops coming to the Cubs. And then I think the starting pitcher is coming potentially even before that. That's just the way it looks. Like there's been more smoke and fire around Taillon now than there has been with Senga. But I guess people aren't ruling out that Senga still might sign. Was it John Heyman, Cody, that was tweeting that the Cubs still had Senga as a target?
He tweeted about that this morning. I don't know if there's been an update since then regarding Senga, considering I came home and sweated through this Illinois game. But yeah, he said that the Cubs were like one of 5 different teams that were, in on Senga, which was like this morning was big news to me because it felt like they had kind of taken themselves out of it because you hadn't heard anything about them in a while. But yeah, so I mean, Senga is a guy that would be perfect. I did read something about how he's getting offers for 5 to 6 years, which is actually surprising to me.
I think the agent may have corrected that. I think I just read that he meant 5 to 6 multi-year deals, not 5 to 6 year deals, but that is how it was tweeted this morning.
Okay.
And maybe, both.
Well, that's how I read it, right?
Yeah. No. That is what it said this morning. And then I think the agent or somebody clarified, like, this is not, he does not have multiple 6 year deals. At least that was understanding recently.
Okay. Ryan, how late do I have? Let's get to the serious business here, because if they sign one of the shortstops, we would do another emergency podcast. But it's 9-10 at night here, how late do I have to stay up before I can say, you know what, I'm passing this off? Cody's going to be awake. Ryan's 2 hours behind. At what point can I just say I'm going to bed?
See, Luke, I can talk to Cody and Corey and be like, I don't know if you guys should go to bed at all. You got to get your 8 hours. You have a child. Like, I don't know.
8 hours.
I don't know.
At least.
I don't know if I could tell you. I don't know if I can tell you not to go to sleep, right? I don't know if you can afford to not go to bed at some point.
That's a great point.
Like I said, I don't know. I don't have a sense that anything could happen at I guess what would be like 10 p.m. here.
Yeah.
2 hours ahead, like midnight there. I don't have a sense that anything could happen then or later. It's just, again, it goes back to what we've been talking about. Like, these things can just happen out of nowhere. And then you got to be ready to get on an emergency podcast with the boys. So that's
so you
if
haven't
that happens tonight, we're there.
Yeah, you haven't seen Jed or Carter Hawkins or David Ross doing like cartwheels down an aisle anywhere. Like, there haven't been any signs. No. There hasn't been like large toasts of like champagne or anything in a hallway.
No, not yet. But Jed, we talked to Jed yesterday. He talked about expecting some more late nights here in the winter meetings. We talked to Carter Hawkins today, saying, asked if that's still kind of the plan. And he said he also expects it to be, another late night or so, likely another late night to come tonight. So we know they're in these discussions. We know they've already offered deals. We know they plan on offering more. So I guess we'll see. Luke. I mean, we'll give you a call, but no guarantee that you'll wake up.
I think we should just keep
for facts. A fax would work.
Just keep the live feed rolling, kind of like some people do on TikTok, and like we'll end the show, but then you can just watch like Cody sweat a basketball game, and then like in 3 hours we'll turn it back into a podcast. You can watch me eat dinner, like no sound, no nothing, and then it'll be like, hey, we're back.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that idea.
You
guys just alert me if something's going on.
Oh my God.
Just set an alarm for every hour on the hour, Luke, until 4 a.m.
Cody got Bellinger to come to the Cubs today. He has the potential still of 2 shortstops or 3 shortstops or 1 shortstop coming to the team. He's still got a possibility of Tyon or Senga coming to the Cubs. He's still got a possibility of a trade.
Or both.
Yep. His Illini beat Texas. He's happy about that. The only loss was the Cubs losing the draft lottery, and now they're picking 13.
You can't win them all, Luke.
Win them all. Just happy to win one, Cody.
It's just nice to win one. And
that's
honestly, that's what the Bellinger signing is. It's just nice to win one. All right, like the video that I tweeted after every win the Cubs had this year, right? It's just nice to win one. Now, I say that because when the Cubs make a move like this, it's just nice, right? Now, I need the big one. Need it like air to breathe. All right.
Let's get it done. And again, if it happens here tonight, we will do another emergency podcast. If it happens tomorrow, we'll do an emergency podcast tomorrow. We have the always planned 120 to 220 live podcast coming up on Wednesday. If something happens outside of that frame, we will break in just like this with an emergency podcast, probably right after it happens. So stick to us on Twitter. Follow Ryan on Twitter, allchgo.com for his articles from San Diego. He's got more work to do. I know he does. So we're going to let him go. And thanks to everybody that jumped in the chat. We had like 200 some people for a while there, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
200 some people to tune into some brainless Cubs simp today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right.
And only one of us is you, Cody.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I said 270 tuned in to some brainless
for a 1-year deal.
simp.
For a 1-year deal.
Deal.
Wait till Correa and Swanson sign here. Oh, it's going to be something.
Oh,
Thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast presented by DraftKings, America's top-rated sportsbook. Use the promo code CHGO when you sign up. Stay ready and fly the W.